Well, welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Once again, thanks as always for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce, and I am a military trailblazer. So each week, as you're probably aware, we invite a co-host, or in this case tonight, co-hosts, plural, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and unique perspectives. And so the focus for tonight's session is hiring our heroes Salesforce Fellowship program. Please allow me to, or give me a moment to welcome our two co-hosts for tonight's session, Stephanie Murphy and Iris Collis. Stephanie is the Salesforce Fellowship program manager at Hiring Our Heroes. She has a distinguished history of military advocacy and support in the areas of education, family readiness, and spouse employment. And Iris is the outreach coordinator for the Salesforce Fellowship program at Hiring Our Heroes. She has a professional background in education, marketing, and public relations. It is awesome to have you both co-hosting office hours. Stephanie and Iris, welcome. And if you each want to take a moment to further introduce yourself and kind of share your professional stories, that would be great. Stephanie, would you like to go first?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a military spouse of 25 years. Started out after going to the University of Texas in political fundraising, and then was an executive headhunter. So moved around the world quite a bit, lived overseas for about 9-10 years. So when we came back to the NCR area, joined Hiring Our Heroes, and I love my job every day, what I do. I get to do that headhunting piece and serving military families all the same.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Iris, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us on here. So I was a military spouse for over a decade. As some people can hear, I'm not from these parts. I left England several years ago and took an adventure around the world and caught myself a sailor, as they say. But after working in education and other volunteer and public relations positions, I took a break from my career to support my husband around the world, as they say. Returning back to work proved to be far more challenging than I had ever thought it was going to be after taking over a decade off my career. I had struggled immensely until I had decided to start reskilling and upskilling, and took some IT courses and found my way to Hiring Our Heroes, and things dramatically changed for me. I signed up to be on the fellowship program, and a miracle happened, and I was directly hired, and I landed to work with the amazing Stephanie Murphy on the Salesforce Fellowship program, and I couldn't be happier in this space. I've been challenged, I see new things, I learn more every day to help other military members in my position and beyond.
That's fantastic, Iris. Thanks so much for being here, and Stephanie, for you as well. For those joining for the first time, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours, and I do see some new faces out there, which is awesome. And we do that before we kind of open the floor for questions and discussion. And so if you're attending for the first time, these sessions are an informal get-together for essentially gathering with military trailblazers as well as allies, everyone's welcome, to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics in order to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So for the next hour, it's a opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective. Also free to ask questions. And so this will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers to the questions that are provided. Please do keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. So I spend majority of my week kind of pulling different articles from LinkedIn and elsewhere, and I love to share that during the call. It's Salesforce related. Sometimes it's employment opportunities. Sometimes it's learning opportunities, so check that out. If you do want to ask a question at any point during today's session, feel free to do so. You can either raise your hand and I'll call on you in order, or if you are shy, which is no worries, go ahead and post that in chat and I'll be monitoring chat and I'll pull that up and ask it for you. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stephanie and Iris, who have some slides that they've put together to share kind of what Hiring Our Heroes Fellowship Program is before we open the floor for questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much, David. And I just want to say, thanks to Salesforce. If it wasn't for Salesforce, this would not be possible. And we would not be doing what we do. So I just wanted to make sure and recognize that. Again, I see a lot of fellows' names and candidates and current candidates in the windows. So welcome for this evening. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen. I thought it would be helpful just to explain who Hiring Our Heroes, actually is. We are part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm. And why I think that's important to share is that we've been doing this for about 10 years now. We started back in March 2011. This is when transitioning service members were getting out. Unemployment was over 20%, and the DoD was paying the unemployment, but it was coming out of the operational budgets where that service member left. So as you can imagine, when the war kicked off, this was not sustainable. So the chamber went back and worked with the current administration, and it's what you know today, but that's where the Skill Bridge program came about. And this is, Department of Defense MOU that we have with them, and we're just one of about 200 different opportunities that transitioning service members can do. But it's basically in your last 6 months of active duty, you get the opportunity to do a Skill Bridge program. And with Hiring Our Heroes, our main program is the Corporate Fellowship program. It's nationwide. We have over 17 different locations. And this is where a service member in their last 6 months of active duty has the opportunity to work with a civilian host company that then they will go and work with whenever they, transition out of the military. Salesforce came to us last spring during the height of COVID and said, we really want to partner with you guys. We want to be able to let you do the fellowship as the experts there because we want to help those that have been affected by COVID. So we launched the program last fall. Typically, we do 3 cohorts a year. Well, they wanted to do 3 in 5 months because it was very important to them to get money in the pockets of military families due to COVID. So we did that. It was supposed to be for just experience, but 87% of them got job offers. So as you can imagine, that was fantastic. So now we have a full-time partnership working with Salesforce. And now everything is for the intent to hire, like the rest of our fellowships. And on top of that, now transitioning service members are allowed on top of military spouses and veterans. Oh, great. Thanks, David. All righty. Let's go a couple of slides forward. All right. Most of you guys are here because you're interested in Salesforce. You probably already know about it, but just in case you're new and you've just applied to our program or just learned of it, just wanted to throw this out there. And of course, David, you can add in anything more you need. But Salesforce is the #1 CRM in the world for the 9th year in a row. I like to describe it to those that are just starting in the ecosystem to think of, if you've ever ordered Starbucks on your phone, if you've ever called USAA on your policy or made a reservation, say with Marriott, it is a fabulous way for companies to manage their customer base, and you have been part of that when you've done those. All right, next slide. And I must mention the Salesforce Talent Alliance. So we love to help as many as we can in the fellowship, but it doesn't match up for everybody, and it's not for everybody. So we highly encourage and try to promote the Salesforce Talent Alliance. So Salesforce Military started this alliance, and it has now over 700 different employers in there that is hiring. And if they're not hiring at this moment, you as a military member having at least one certification is guaranteed an interview. So if nothing else, it puts you in their database if they're not hiring today. It helps you network, and you can think of it as practice because, as we'll talk about in a little bit, interviewing doesn't come to everybody, and it does take practice. All right, next slide. All right, so let's talk about the program. It's 100% remote and virtual program for the.
Apologies, Stephanie. Yeah, it's not a PowerPoint, so I'm struggling with the scrolling a little bit.
So it's totally remote, totally virtual for the fellowship, but also 99.9% of the roles afterwards are as well. And what's important to know about that is that it's a portable career. You can do it from anywhere. And so this program helps bridge the gap for that. All right, maybe scroll down just a tad. Few highlights for the last year. We've had over 120 fellows, almost 50 host companies. We have a 92% job offer rate, but the last two cohorts for this year, we had 100%. And so that's important to know that if you get through the process and get your fellowship, you have a very, very, very high chance of having a full-time position. And we're going to talk about that and how you can do that. As there is no college degree required for the program, quite a few individuals have associates or something, but that doesn't mean you have to have that. Again, talked about it being portable and who it's open to. All right, next slide. So let's talk through the pathway to getting here, right? We highly encourage people to apply as soon as possible and think of it more as an interest form, because what this is going to do, first of all, is it's going to send straight to Iris. Within 2 business days, she's going to send you the initial information. In there is not only going to be the dates, details, requirements of all 3 categories for a transitioning service member, military spouse, or veteran, what they need to do in order to get to that deadline of details. But it doesn't have any negative effect on you if you decide to not do it during that time frame, or you need to move to the next cohort, life happens, your transition date changes. So I just like to share that there's some people get hung up with, I don't have all the details yet, I don't want to apply. Don't think of it as like that. At the same time, make sure you're going to Salesforce Military, what used to be VetForce, and signing up to register to get started on your certification, because you do have to have at least one of the 18 certifications that Salesforce Military offers for our program. We don't care which one you have. Salesforce Military, though, highly encourages the admin. It's going to give you the best foundation of the platform, and then you can build off of the stackable credentials of the other certifications. So in the process of doing that, once you have met all the requirements by the application deadline, and we do 3 cohorts a year. So very general, one will start in January, one starts in May, one starts in August. And every year they're a little bit different with a few dates of, just the different years. Once you have all those requirements, then Iris will finish your file, introduce you to me, and then someone on our team will do the initial interview. We like to send out the interview questions that we're going to be asking you. And some people are always like, well, gosh, why would you do that? As I mentioned, we are very much into the interviewing process and mentoring you and helping you through that. So a couple of things happen there. The very first question is going to basically be your elevator pitch. We want to role play with you and help you through that process. So we also give you resources after the interview of all the things that we've talked about during that interview. So almost think of it as a role play. But there's also some very strategic questions in there that let us know if you've done your homework. We can tell if you've prepared and what you've done. And because of all of the resources we share throughout the process, everybody is different in their path, but we can definitely tell the individuals who have gone the extra step and done their homework. And that comes into play to who's going to be put into the resume release. And I'll get to that in just a second. The next piece of it that I would also say is there's a lot of information that's sent out from us once you do apply. You can't process it all. The fellowship's a complicated process. Getting your certification is a complicated process. Life is complicated depending on if you're transitioning or moving back into the workspace or changing, careers. So always go back and reference that. I guarantee you there's information in there to answer most of your questions. If not, though, Iris and I are here to help you. Okay, let's talk about once you've made it through our process and you're ready for that resume release. What does that mean? So that means I have already contacted and connected with all of the host companies that are Salesforce aligned partners. They range from a nonprofit to, large corporations, maybe some of the bigger SIs that's doing implementations for Salesforce. And they have all said they have intent to hire with open job descriptions. They have a Salesforce professional on staff that's going to act as a mentor for you during your fellowship. That's a very important piece that we've learned through this process. Also, they're going to have enough work for you Monday through Thursday. because on Fridays you have off from your host company. And I send out a PDF with all of the resumes in alphabetical order. So there is no ranking on my end. And the reason for this is everybody brings different skills to the table. And, the majority of our skill set is 6 months and below in the ecosystem. So you are bringing other skills prior to this and other careers to the table. Plus, every host company is looking for something different. They might be looking for an admin. They might be looking for a BA, or they might be looking for, someone to go into the developer route that probably had some development background, or maybe into consultancy. So maybe you're coming to the table with a lot of sales background. It really just depends. So we do not rank, and I think that's important to know. So then the host companies take in these resumes, they circulate them within their teams, and then they decide who they want to interview due to what they're looking for and what those skill sets are. I always do a candidate briefing on the day that those resumes go out to host companies. So I invite all the candidates back in, we go through this process, and I talk you through what you should be asking whenever those host companies are reaching out to confirm those interviews. I also see this because the host companies CC me, so I can track these for you guys. I share with you all of the former fellows that are at that company that you can connect with. And the reason that's important is networking is so important. I know David talks about that a lot here on his office hours, but we talk about it a lot here at HOH. 85% of jobs are gotten because of your network. So finding out what is it really like there at that company? What was their journey? How are things going? What's their role now? And that really helps you understand as you're moving forward. So this interview process lasts anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks. At the end of that time frame, everybody owes me a selection form. So that selection form for candidates is the ranking of all your interviews in order of what you want. And then the host companies do the same thing. Then the following week, I will do the matches. So if you put company A as your number one and company A put you as their number one, it's an automatic match. Every time we have a couple of rock stars in the resume release, and they may have 3 or 4 number one picks, I will let that candidate pick their fellowship. I figure it's your career. You can, pick the one that you want to. Usually it's a match to what they also put there. How do you become a rock star, right? I know this is how can I be the best in that process? I just like to say everybody's always in a different phase of their journey. And so don't compare yourself to others. But if you do all the requirements and try to do as many of the details that we share, so you're networking. I know a lot of you guys have done Mirabis before, so you have a huge network there that you can work through and understand. Do you have a Veterati mentor? Is someone just helping you through that? Are you going to Candifor and getting those interviews, mock interviews done? I know David had them on last month. They're phenomenal and they're free for the military community. Some individuals are just going to have more degrees than you, and you can't do anything about that. But some of them might have their PMP, some project management work. So it really just depends on what they have. But we try to tell everybody, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We are not for everybody. You should still be doing interviews. And then second, don't compare yourself to others. So then the host companies have their preferences. We do the matches and we extend the fellowship. Once this takes place, then we start getting fast forward to get ready for orientation. Orientation is technically the first week of the 12 weeks of the fellowship. It's 2 days worth. We are on timeline now every year with the same fellowships within HOH. So we have one day that's a national type orientation with the other 700 to 800 different fellows across the country that are transitioning service members and military spouses. And a lot of that's going to be about branding, networking, your LinkedIn. And I know LinkedIn's huge in the ecosystem. Having a employer roundtable discussion, hearing what it's to be successful, at different companies and what hiring managers think are successful for fellows to do during the fellowship. And then day 2 is going to really be a little bit more Salesforce oriented. The Salesforce military team comes in to talk to us. We usually have some former fellows that are going to be on, and they're going to discuss, what did they do week one? Their imposter syndrome, how they worked through that, how they networked in their company, how they showed their skills as much as they possibly could. And then we get started for week one. You start with your host company and you work with them Monday through Thursday, whatever battle rhythm you guys work out. So like we're doing here, you'll have meetings this way. You might be invited to some client meetings. You might just sit around and take notes. We've had a couple of fellows that have been hired directly as VAs because of their discovery note-taking process. So anywhere that you can stand out to do as much as possible in that role timeframe. Also meeting with your mentor, getting direction and feedback on the projects that you are doing. We've also learned that a lot of different tools are used in the fellowship at these different companies and tasks that you use. So we try to do on Fridays, the huddles, the professional development, to show you a little bit more of that. So we'll have someone come in and talk about how to use Jira, the different agile methods, maybe how to use Slack incorporated with Salesforce, open app builders. So we sometimes the cohort will tell us what they want. So we had financial force discussion once because we had several fellows working on those type of projects. But we really tried to gear on Fridays just for a couple of hours to really help you be the best that you can be in your role. And then week 4 and week 8, I do a very deliberate talk with the host companies. So week 4, and we tell you the huddle before so that I can be tracking any details and make sure that you're on your projects, you have your mentor, you're in the job that you're supposed to be in. And when I speak to them, I also plant the seed that week 8, when I call back next month, I'm going to be asking about that offer. What are those follow-on assignment going to look like? Do they need to do further interviewing? Is it in the role that they were thinking it was going to be? Because HR sometimes takes a little long to get an offer. We don't want to wait to the very end and then that not take place. So we try to work through that together. I also do very one-on-one conversations with everyone that wants it. If you do get an offer and you want to talk through the details, you want to, figure out how to negotiate that, I work through that with you as well. And then we do a virtual graduation on the last day of your fellowship. Hopefully everybody has a job and a job offer. That's very important to us on this team and HOH because that's all we do is help for employment for those in the military community. All right, that was a lot of information. I think it's a good time maybe to pause and see if we have questions, David.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephanie and Iris. A lot of great information. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but if anyone wants to raise their hand and take the floor or just type your question in chat, would love to hear what questions you have. All right, and Sandeep, you've got a question.
Hi, thank you for this time. I really appreciate this. And I have a question regarding the program. So if we happen to get selected for this program, and if we are traveling overseas, but our residency is in US, is that a possibility or not? Like if I'm going overseas for like 10 weeks during the cohort, is that?
No, so that's a good question. So to start from the beginning, you have to reside in the United States for the fellowship. We do not deal with any SOFA agreements, for overseas where other installations may be. So that being said, that would be discussed in the individual, initial interview with HOH staff. Second, you would have to have an agreement and understanding with your host company. They would really need to understand that if, say, you were going to visit family during a deployment or, something of that nature, and have to have an agreement where you agree to the U.S. business hours that they are. We haven't had any scenarios like that yet. Most individuals, are stateside, but there's always that one that is an individual case that might have to be worked through.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much, Sandeep. We've got a question from Kathleen in the chat who says, I heard that Salesforce raised their contribution to veterans. Has this affected the program? I'm assuming from a funding perspective and perhaps with the extension of additional cohorts into the future.
So good news, the partnership has, extended. As far as we know, we're going to continue it. Yes, so it's very good news. And I think Salesforce Military tries to help as many as they possibly can. So they not only have our fellowship, but they also have a Town Alliance Fellowship called K2, which helps those in underrepresented areas. So they're just trying to do anything that they can, to help. One, because they're a very giving company, but also two, there's just so many different more roles out there than talent. So bring your friends, tell them about it, bring them to the table. We'll help them out as much as we can.
Great question, Kathleen. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions here. James asks, is there a max cap of candidates for a cohort?
No, there was during the pilot, but we do not anymore, which is very nice. So if we had 60 in a cohort, I guarantee you we have enough host companies to do that. Every single cohort, we have host companies that don't have roles filled.
That is awesome news. So tell your friends, everyone.
Yes.
Let's see. Samantha has her hand raised. Samantha, do you want to take the floor for a question?
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Iris and David. My question is, what are some of the host companies that are partnering with HOH for the fellowship?
So it varies cohort to cohort. And as you can imagine, these host companies have to predict what their hiring needs are, not only 3 months after the fellowship, but usually about 2 to 3 months out. So it's about a 5 to 6 month forecast. So it varies. And I say that because there's never any guarantees. But we've had USAA, Capgemini, we have several nonprofits, some of the very successful SIs. And they're always hiring. And all of them are part of the Talent Alliance. They're all Salesforce aligned companies, partners.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I had a couple questions come in pretty much at the same time. So we'll take the one in the chat first. And apologies, all I'm seeing in my chat is C. Van Rosendale. So I don't have your first name, but asked, you mentioned that candidates may be rock stars and a top choice for multiple companies. Can you describe the process of how they would have the opportunity to choose from who they want to have their fellowship experience with? And then there's a follow-up question. Can a candidate list a couple of companies as their top choice?
Sure. So, hey, Courtney, she's one of our candidates in our current process right now, which is great. I'm going to be communicating with everyone next week because their selection sheets due on the 9th. Yes, so we usually have a couple of rockstar candidates, as I mentioned. You can rank different individual host companies as your number one, meaning if any of those 2 or 3 selected you, then that would be your automatic choice. Did that answer all of it? I'm sorry. Was there a second piece I didn't get to?
Yeah, I think you answered it. So yes, you can definitely list a couple companies. I appreciate the question, Courtney. And Michael, you had your hand raised. You might have put it down if that answered your question. Did you still have a question?
Yes, thank you. So as I'm networking, one, thank you for the initial email. I've been accepted to Marivis. The Candifor is amazing. So I did the initial with that, and your welcome email is amazing with all the resources. Secondly, if your resume is out there and we're not getting any bites from the companies, do you help like midway through say, hey, have you looked at these folks' resumes?
Sure. So nice to see you, Michael. I'm glad you've applied. Yes, I'll address that in a couple of different ways. So yes, during the resume release, halfway through, there are always a handful of individuals that haven't had any interviews. So I do a second resume release to highlight those individuals. And I did that this week on Monday, and that spurred some of the host companies to reach out to those individuals. I find that host companies work off deadlines just like we do. They're very human. So there's a lot of activity that's happening now and next week because of, deadlines that they have coming up. And then also, as HOH does not do resumes for candidates, we do highly encourage during the interview process with us some of the things that you can do to, make your resume stand out. We give some resources such as Hire Heroes is a fabulous, fabulous place to go to get started with your resume as well. And then we share some Salesforce example resumes, as you may not have all the experience yet. And we do this after the initial interview. You can just see the language and understanding how people are putting that on their resume, because you may have some of those skill sets in your past careers that you can highlight in a different way, even though you're not familiar as much with the Salesforce CRM. Did that answer everything, Michael?
Yes, and I do have a follow-up. So I've been working the LinkedIn and definitely trying to find businesses in the New Hampshire, Northeast area. If I come across a business that has interest, I've been telling them about HOH. Is there are we able to steer businesses in your direction?
Absolutely. That's the easiest way to do a fellowship, especially if you bring them to the table. We have a discussion with them. They have to meet the requirements, of being able to host a fellow. But if that's met, it's usually not a problem whatsoever.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great questions, Michael. Thank you. I think that's it from hands raised as well as the chat. Does anyone else want to ask a quick question before Stephanie finishes out the slide deck? All right, back to you, Stephanie.
All right, let's see what we have. We may have covered everything.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah. Hey, Steve.
Absolutely.
Hey, so yeah, I just wanted to add that I just graduated from the most recent cohort, and the 2 times that were probably the most nail biting was when the resume release went out and nobody got any responses. I didn't get any responses for a while. And so I thought, oh crap, nobody likes my resume. That wasn't the case at all. It all came through just like Stephanie said. Stephanie's a great hand holder for the whole process. But the other was at the end with getting a job offer. Nothing happened. And I know there were a number of us in the cohort that nothing happened until like day before or 2 days before graduation. So it'll all come together, but it can be nerve-wracking.
What's important to us is not always important to everybody else.
Right.
All right, David, let's see what's on these next few slides. I probably covered it, but just in case.
Yeah, we'll just scroll down here.
Hey, Leia. So for those of you who haven't started yet, this just gives you an idea for getting started on Salesforce Military. So it used to be where you would get qualified through Troop ID. They've changed it now to ID.me. Iris caught that a couple of days ago. And you get started on there, and this is free. Classes sometimes are up to $5,000. You pick, the level that you're going to do. You get those modules. You get moving. It's self-paced. Highly encourage you to put maybe a goal date out there, especially tied to the cohort dates if you're trying to work through that. And then just do a little bit each day or weekend or whatever your schedule can manage. We have people every cohort that don't make the deadline, and that's okay. They're usually the rock stars in the next cohort if they end up coming back, because they use that time in between to, do all the things they hadn't had a chance to do yet. All right, next part. Again, just talking about who's eligible. I know there was a question on this, but it's transitioning service members, veterans, military spouses. It can be a skill bridge for transitioning service members. Must reside in the U.S., as transitioning service members can reside overseas. So there's not a SOFA requirement for them because they are still eligible for a skill bridge. They just have to agree to work U.S. business hours, which could be very demanding and hard depending on where they live. But we work through that with them. Must have a Salesforce certification before the deadline. Must be available the whole 12 weeks for the full-time fellowship, and must be able to work in the U.S. without sponsorship. And then, the application details, and you can apply there. All right.
Awesome. If we can pause, we've got a couple comments and questions I wanted to highlight. And so Leia has shared a link to her Google Doc that she wrote based on her Hiring Our Hero fellowship experience. So go ahead and click on that and take a look. That's awesome. Thank you, Leia. And then we've got a couple questions. So first one is, and I know Iris partially addressed this, but Kathleen asked, do you have any recommendations on how to set yourself apart? So obviously that could go for hours, but what are some, I guess, top things that you've seen that the companies have been like, wow, we want this person because of XYZ?
Sure. So yeah, we talked about that just a little bit. And as you can't go and obtain, an MBA or your PMP, you might be able to get your PMP, but you can't get 10 years worth of project management experience like Steve had. But if you do all of the things as far as being engaged and being out there on LinkedIn and really trying to learn more about the ecosystem, we have had people who maybe didn't have as much skill set or as many degrees or certificates, but they were very engaged and they did everything that we had mentioned. Getting a Veterati mentor. A lot of our hiring companies and hiring managers are Veterati mentors, and they use that as an interview. Sometimes we have host companies that do that as well. So then connecting with the Miravis individuals, there's a lot of them that were former fellows and candidates. I would just say, as much as possible, do the things that we suggest, only because we've seen that it works. I hope that helps. And yes, Leia's document's amazing. She took the time to put all that together of what she had accomplished and her journey. So feel free to look at that.
Yeah. And Leia, if it's all right with you, I'll go ahead and reference that in the links that I share. So I've copied that link. I usually post the links that I share during these sessions. I post as an added document on the YouTube channel. So I'll link to your document. Thank you. Couple questions, and we are going to take a picture, so thanks very much for the reminder, Lindsay.
But my question is, my sister is getting married in late June. I was planning on applying for the May cohort. Our companies, man, it's not working. Okay, our company is relatively okay with you taking a couple of days off to attend a specific event.
So that's a good question. You are allowed 3 absences while you're in the fellowship. So only 3. And you can use those however you want, and as long as you communicate with your host company and they're fine with that, there's not going to come. Sure.
All right, great question. Thanks very much. And we'll go ahead and see, Michael, you've got your hand raised, and then we'll take your question after that, Dan.
No. So I was lucky enough to start helping out a nonprofit. Will that be able to, as a volunteer, is that a good starting step for building the resume and the interview and all that? And yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. That's the same type of question military spouses pose when they're re-entering the workspace as well as, I have all this volunteer work. It's work, it's why you're doing it. You're learning, and the skill sets that you're doing there are just as important. We help you to be able to highlight that so it looks like you had employment. It's okay that it's volunteer and you weren't getting paid for it, but especially because it applies to this, it's very important to put that on there. And that's a great way to learn and to help yourself set out from the rest.
Great. And I just want to mention to everybody else that's applying, the Baltimore admin group, there's a few different admin groups in the area, and yesterday they had a meeting that I just logged into and got to learn some pretty cool stuff and talk to folks that are actually doing the work in the area. So I highly recommend getting on those those chatter feeds.
Michael, you're like a walking commercial for us. So we share as one of the things to do is to, a lot of these local user groups are still virtual and you can get on to any of them. So yes, that's a great way to learn, connect, find out about jobs, different, career paths that you're interested in doing. They have it all.
It's great comments and questions, Michael. And obviously, with most things being virtual these days, you can attend Salesforce Saturdays and user group sessions across the world. Dan has been patiently waiting. He's asking for a friend, but he says, do fellow candidates ever not get selected for a fellowship?
So great question. I'll back up even before that. Sometimes we have some of the candidates that don't get interviews, and there's just nothing we can do about that. But then I do highly encourage them to connect with the companies on LinkedIn and go to Talent Alliance and start looking that way. And then there are individuals who go through the interview process, maybe had several interviews and do not get a fellowship. That is possible. Someone else just beat you out of it.
Gotcha. Thanks very much, Stephanie. All right, we've got a few folks with hands raised. Denise, you are first and you have the floor.
Hey, and hi, Michael. I was on that group with you yesterday in the Baltimore admins group. I have a question. If we're going to steer people towards doing your fellowship, how far in advance do you come out with your cohort dates?
Sure. So one of the slides here at the end that we'll get to will show the next 3 years. Next 3 cohorts. But every year they're very, very similar in dates. So anytime someone applies and say they're not interested till the second one of next year, we can still put them in that bin, so to speak, in our CRM. So that is very possible. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, and I pulled that slide up, and I think we've got one more question from Elio.
Hey, David. I actually don't have a question. I actually had a success story, but I was kind of hoping I come up to the last. I know some of the folks on these calls, you're trying to network, you're trying to get connected. I work for Salesforce, and I was reached out by one of you in these Wednesday calls. Well, long story short, that person accepted a job in the ecosystem a few days ago. They went through the Merivis cohort, got certified. They were in a completely different industry for 20 years, and they thought they had to start as an admin, and they didn't understand why they had to go through the admin certification. Through networking, this person learned that sometimes you have to learn the nomenclature, the taxonomy of a different work environment. And that really allowed this person to then showcase the 20-year experience that they brought to the table. And it's just one of the success stories that I want you to think about when you are going through some of these programs or you're volunteering. Everything is going to be a stepping stone for you. It might not be a big step, but look at it more of a puzzle, right? Somebody asked about volunteering. That's a great way to show a company that you might have a weakness and you're just building that skill. You're being proactive. Think about that. You're showing a company, hey, I might not know a technology, but I am volunteering because I want to learn about it. That's incredible to an employer. And this person, we share some of those stories together. We started here about 3 months ago, and now they're fully employed and they can't wait to get started. So I just wanted to share that success story about these programs and networking. You're doing everything right. You just got to keep at it. And with that, I yield back to you, David.
Thanks very much, Elio. I appreciate you sharing that. We've got a few more questions, but before we tackle those, I did want to let Stephanie and Iris get through their slides. So we'll go ahead and pause the awesome questions for a second until we finish the slides, and then we'll reattack.
Sure. So we just wanted to touch base here to let you know. So if you're a transitioning service member, obviously you're receiving your pay from the DoD. But if you command will sign off on it, if you're getting out of the military in the middle of the cohort, then the day that that happens, you become a veteran and you start receiving a stipend. So it is still possible. That is not possible with a lot of other skill bridge. So we'll work through that with you. So veterans, military spouses receive a $25 an hour stipend. It's paid by Salesforce through a third-party agency that becomes technically your employer during that time frame, during the fellowship. And of course, that is not tied to the salary potential that you would get in your full-time role. All right. And then the next slide, I think, might have, okay, we definitely talked about all of that. So we can skip that slide. These are the cohort dates that are coming up for this year. And as I mentioned, we do 3 a year. They're pretty much around the exact same time frame, maybe a day here or there. I know cohort 1's application deadline, has already come and gone, but they'll be about the same timelines each year. And that's it for the slides.
All
All right, I'm going to stop presenting and we're going to go back into the questions. And I just got to get caught up on who is next. So I think, Eric, you are next, and then we will go ahead and tackle Matthew's question in chat and then come back around to Jemmy. And if we do run out of time, folks, I have provided the links for Stephanie and Iris's LinkedIn profiles. Please do feel free to chat with them if we're not able to answer all your questions. But for the moment, Eric, you have the floor. What is your question?
Hi, everyone. Glad to finally be here. Thanks, David. I've been trying to get on these for like weeks, just letting you know. I always get off right around the time they start. So sorry for being in uniform.
No,
so my question was, so today I'm actually in the Soldier for Life transition assistance classes right now. And something that came up was CSP on ETS leave without command approval. I guess we do have soldiers that have that issue where like they can't get approved for it. They're more than qualified, but due to regulation, they're unable to get any command approval. So in the transition assistance program, they said if you can take terminal leave to cover your entirety of your CSP, you can do that without command approval. Is that something that you can do with hiring our heroes?
It is, and that would go along the lines too of that timeline when you get out, maybe you transition to a veteran. It's really a personal choice. We recommend to not do that only because, you know, you have that leave for a reason. However, you totally can do that. And every CS transition office and every branch is a little bit different. So we try to work with individuals when they come, you know, with a situation like that on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you. Yeah, I have soldiers that applies to. I know a lot of people probably have service members that may apply to. I had one other question. This is I'm just curious. So are we able to change our resume that we turned in already when we applied for the cohort? I know I applied recently or not too long ago, and I know I've learned a lot on my resume already, and that's something I really want to make sure is tailored really well when I'm coming to the cohort, like to get accepted to the cohort, that I have a good resume, as well as when we leave, obviously, the resume that I turned in is probably not going to be the one that I want.
Sure. Think of it as a starting point. You'll have until the application deadline. So you'll go through the interview with HOH, and we'll probably even give you some more tips, and you still then can send in that best resume before it goes out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys.
Sure. We want it to be the best version for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great questions, Eric. And something else to consider, if you can get your command to agree to permissive TDY and they grant it, means you obviously won't have to burn leave and you can sell that back at the end. Even though I didn't go through hiring our heroes because it didn't exist at the time that I transitioned, I chose that option. So kind of got the best of both worlds. So just something to file away if it's an option. Some commands will let you do it, some won't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've had that happen too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answers.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna continue on the questions here. Matthew, we're gonna grab your question and then we'll circle back to Jemmy. Matthew asks, so must be available to work 30 to 45 days after the fellowship. Does that mean that you begin working full time 45 days after the end of the cohort, or do you work 30 to 45 days? Let's see. Or you work 30 to 45 days after the cohort for the company?
That statement's really there for people to understand. When you finish the fellowship, host companies are going to want you to start the next day. That's what a lot of people negotiate. However, if you're a transitioning service member and you have a little bit of that leave left over, you still need to check out of your unit. You still need to clear, or maybe you want to use some of that leave to go on another vacation before you start that next career. That's what that's for. Just expect to accept your offer to start with a start date 30 to 45 days after the fellowship. We don't encourage past that. Plus, you don't want to lose too much of that momentum that you've learned during the fellowship.
Yeah, great point and great question. Jemmy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, Stephanie, Iris. I'm really here not to ask a question, but to quickly share my experience because I'm part of 21-2 cohort and sort of representing military spouses. I'm a veteran spouse and I have had over a decade of staying at home, working from home as a stay-at-home mom. But I want to vouch for Stephanie. She was just incredible. She's an advocate for you. Sure, she's doing the screening and she makes sure you're qualified for the program, but really you have to see her and Iris as someone who will be there to support you. So if any out there, your spouses, or if you're a veteran spouse, you have any questions, we have similar backgrounds, feel free to connect and ask, and I'm very happy to help.
That's awesome. Thanks very much, Jemmy, for that. I appreciate it. Laura, you've got the floor for your question or comment.
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear.
Okay, I'm driving, so I just want to make sure I could be here. So I'm curious. My question is more of what roles do you guys see that are offered in the cohort? Are they more consulting? Are they admin? Are they business analyst? Like what do you guys see the most of?
Laura, thanks for the question. It varies from cohort to cohort and what the needs are of the host companies, but we see everything. So we see admins, business analysts, consultants. Quite often now in the last couple of cohorts, we've seen a lot more developers. So it really just depends.
Great question. I think I have gotten everybody from raised hands as well as chat. If anyone, if I missed you, feel free to type your question back in chat or raise your hand. We've got about 4 minutes left for some final questions. And so while we're waiting for that, I actually have a question. So Stephanie, you had mentioned rock stars earlier in the discussion. What are some best practices that the folks that have really gone through the program and shined and maybe had multiple offers from different companies or even been selected before they completed the cohort, which I've heard of in some cases, what are some things they've done to stand out?
Sure. So these are individuals that bring some skill sets to the table, that they probably have multiple certifications. They don't just have one. They have that platform app builder, maybe a third one or a fourth one. They may have been working that pro bono work as well. If they were, also might have a higher degree. So some of them have their MBA, some of them have their PMP. And this is always something that host companies like. And then also some of them have just been networking and have been coming to David's hours, been going to Bill's hours on Friday. They have been, with Veterati individuals, and they just know the ecosystem a little bit better than others and how to maneuver themselves in it. And past that, I can't really say anything differently. I mean, of course, they might have some skill sets as people, interaction, social skills, and interviews very, very well. So those are the individuals that get those multiple offers and get to select their fellowship. And then we have a couple of, people that go through as fellows, and maybe their company's taken a really long time to get that offer coming and they get really nervous. So I network them out to other host companies I know that are hiring, but just didn't participate in the fellowship. And at the end, they have 2 or 3 offers and they have to decide. I had several this past cohort for that. Again, we would love for it to be with your host company, but if it doesn't work out that way, I'm going to make sure it's with somebody.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we close, just wanted to highlight next week's session. We're going to be having it with Nana Gregg. She's going to be talking about Salesforce admin and solution architect best practices. She's a Salesforce MVP and a solution architect with VFP Consulting. So hopefully we will see you next week. And we got a question from Dwayne. And he's asking about Bill's office hours on Friday. So if you're not aware, Military Trailblazer office hours is actually not my creation. I'm borrowing it from Bill Kuehler. Bill Kuehler started it a while ago. He does technical sessions. So he does sessions on Friday at noon EST. And you can sign up from the same link as you would for my sessions. And his are phenomenal because you can bring a problem to him and he'll solve it either code or config right in front of you and then provide you with the code if he's written it or provide you with steps to get to the configuration. He has phenomenal sessions. So if you haven't attended one of his sessions and you've got a burning question about something technical, feel free to attend those. All right, and I think that's going to do it for us tonight. If you do have follow-on questions, please do feel free to get in touch with Stephanie and Iris. And before we close, I did want to thank both of you, Stephanie and Iris, for the amazing session tonight. Answered a ton of questions. It was a great collaborative discussion. Thank you so much for co-hosting with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. And again, thanks to Salesforce for making this possible.
And
absolutely.
I'm so super excited. I came here a few weeks ago like a nervous little puppy, and David's welcomed me, and here I am co-hosting with Stephanie. I'm like, ah! I love it.
And we love having you. It's been awesome. Thanks so much. Oh, and Eric, I see you've got your hand raised. Did you want to sneak a question in under the wire?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, I've been freaking out about coming to these and or networking in general. It's something that I've been having a lot of trouble with. And this just made it really easy. You guys are literally asking the same questions I was wondering. You're all in the same boat. That's one of the things that I'm finding that SFL TAP is helpful, but it doesn't really, some of those don't apply. A lot of those people are just retiring or they're in different situations. So having a group of people that are all in the same situation, who've navigated the same thing, who are looking to do the same thing, who have some of the answers, it's just really refreshing. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And obviously, I enjoy seeing everyone's face and enjoy the opportunity to help out. And with that, we will go ahead and close. Please join us next week. And in the meantime, have yourself an awesome rest of your evening and a great week.